Instigators, WGR Sports Radio 550 and MSG, and the heart just started racing a little bit more because we actually had to have Lou Lamoriello wait 2.5 minutes on hold. And one thing I know, Lou, you're a busy man, and we don't want to keep you on hold, and we are so grateful to have you on the show. Good morning, and welcome to the Instigators. You're on with Andrew and Craig Rivet.
Good morning, guys. It's my pleasure.
Well, it's our pleasure. And I do have one thing to say. Well, Craig, do you want to tell them what we both did today before we got on our show?
Yeah. Andrew and I were prepping for the show earlier this morning, and it was interesting. I said to Andrew, Andrew, this was kind of weird, but I shaved this morning to make sure I had no facial hair. I wanted to be look good and to be sharp. And Andrew started laughing his head off because he's like, Craig, I did the exact same thing. So we're both clean shaven for you right now. We're ready to rock and roll.
Well, can you still play?
No.
Well, you know what, Lou? I've lost about 15 pounds, I'd say here. So, I mean, how long you look? How much ice time you looking for?
A lot of hesitation there before you answered that question, though.
Well, the hesitation was surrounded by question mark of how much ice time are you asking me for?
Well, that's another subject.
Well, if it's minimal, I can produce for you, Lou. I think I owe you a second chance anyway after the first contract you signed me to. Listen,
Yeah.
I
Well
do have
said.
a question for you. What's that?
I said, well said.
Yeah. Well said. Well, glad you agree with me. Lou Lamoriello joining the Instigators here with Andrew and Craig. I do have one question. Did you ever try to acquire a young Craig Rivet when he hit the trade market ever back in your days as general manager in New Jersey?
Yes, I did. I looked into it. I had a lot of respect for the way you played, Craig. You came to play every night, and you certainly, in my opinion, could have fit into the type of players that we wanted in New Jersey, especially during the era, that you were in the highlight of your career, without question.
Well, I thoroughly appreciate that. I'm sweating right now. I don't know why that's happening, but I'm starting to get the brow sweat, and but I appreciate the kind words.
Lou, I agree with you. I played with Craig only 1 year, and there, without question, would have fit the Lou Lamoriello mold of what is expected of your player. And can you just speak a little bit to that? Because I think is that what you think you're most well known for? I mean, you've won 3 Stanley Cups. You've won a World Cup. I mean, you're a Hall of Famer as a builder. And would you say that that's what you're most known for, is what you expect from your players and inside your culture?
I couldn't answer that. I think the players who played for any of the teams that I've been associated would have to stand. But I think it's very simplistic and Andrew, you were there in New Jersey and had several conversations with me. I think all players want is honesty right up front, knowing where they stand, knowing what their role is, and never having any question with that. And then there comes with that some foundational thought process, and that is that simplistically the logo and the name can never get confused, and that I've always felt teams win championships, individual players can help you win games, but unless you've got everybody going in the same direction and for the same common goal, and character plays such a role in that, and your top players have to be your character players because they're going to drive the bus.
Yes, I had the opportunity to play with a couple in New Jersey Devils in my time. One was Sheldon Surrey, a young, big physical strapping defenseman from the Western Hockey League. He played a few years in the New Jersey organization, and also Randy McKay, a guy that I absolutely loved playing with, his character and what he did and how he played for his teammates. They spoke very highly of the standard in which you had with your team and your organization, and the rules that went along with being a New Jersey Devil back in the day. Can you explain to me your philosophy, and it's intriguing to me about, the facial hair type thing, making sure that you look presentable, not having this long dreaded hair. What is your philosophy with all these things?
Well, I think it goes back to, the world we live in. I think that what you try to establish with something like this is that everybody is the same. In other words, no matter whether you came from junior hockey, whether you came from college, whether you came from Europe, you all are willing to sacrifice and give up your own identity to be a part of an identity of a team. And that's where you start. If you think about it, when people go into the armed forces, no matter what country it is, the first thing they do is give them all the same type of T-shirts and shorts, and whether they come from affluent families, whether they come from a deprived area, no matter what, once they get into that training, they're all equal. No one knows any different. So you start off with that foundation, and everything is left once you go into the locker room as equal. Whether you're getting paid, whether you're making $2 million a year, whether you're making $700,000 a year, whether you've got a long-term contract, no matter what, your performance and the way you sort of hold yourself will determine what success you have. Your ice time will determine performance. There is nothing that's going to get in the way. And if everybody feels that way, you've got a better chance of having success. There's no mind games. I coached in college for a number of years and had a lot of players go to pro hockey and have careers, and I kept in touch with them. And I really had a better understanding of some of the things that they went through with different organizations and so forth. And, I tried to learn from all their experiences so that when I did come to New Jersey, I would erase any of those things that got in the way of having success. And I don't think it's anything extraordinary that was asked when you ask of a player to give whatever he has to give, to accept the role that he's going to play. And the most important thing with the role is defining what that role is and making sure that they hold to those standards, or if not, they're not going to continue to be a devil, or they're not going to get the ice time that maybe they think they deserve, because they're not performing the way they can, no matter what their contract was, or no matter, what their experiences, or no matter what the awards they had won in the past. We're in a winning business, and the only way to win in team sports is to have everybody on the same page, supporting each other. I have 3 words with that you have to have within a team. You have to trust, in no order, you have to trust each other, you have to respect each other, and you have to care for each other. And, that's basically what the foundation, in my opinion, is what we live by and continue to live by.
That voice right there is Lou Lamoriello on the phone, New York Islanders general manager, Hall of Famer. And I ask you this question, Lou, and I know that you probably you've used this with many players, because you said it to me. You have a saying about roles, and isn't it something like an orchestra, the trumpeter's trump and the piper's pipe and the drummer's drum?
Yeah, I've had that since college. I used that in college. That and I relate it to the Philharmonic Orchestra. I used to say out of Boston, because I was from that New England area, and that the people who are in that orchestra probably work at their talent harder and longer in hours than any athlete would ever work. And yet for their music to come out where people will listen to or buy or attend, they have to give up, when their, sort of time is, they have to stop immediately. If it's time for the trumpet to stop so that a violinist can take it, they have to be in sync. And that's no different than a team. And I used to take the instruments as their roles. A drummer, what his role was, a violinist, what their role was. And once you get out of that type of role, the end result is not going to be good. And you've got to accept it. And if you can't accept it, then we'll have to find a team that maybe is looking for the role that you'd like, because it's not going to be used here.
Instigators. That voice right there is Lou Lamoriello, New York Islanders general manager, Hall of Famer. He's in the Hall of Fame as a builder. He's been the general manager of the New Jersey Devils, Toronto Maple Leafs, and now the New York Islanders. And I had the pleasure of playing for him. And Lou, some of your lessons and rules that you teach your players, they are life-lasting. They're not just hockey-related. And I think that's something that I've learned about you more after playing for you and moving on further into my life as I've had to evolve and do other things. But I'll ask you this: with the generation that you're dealing with, is it still as easy to get them to follow the guidelines, so to speak? I feel as though today's generation and players, all players in sports, not just hockey players, but all players in sports, and it might have been started with my generation too, but there might be a little more entitlement. So is it harder to keep players in check now with those types of things?
I have not had that problem, and I do not believe that it is any harder. If you have the type of people and type of players that you want, and they have to be talented. No, players first of all want discipline, and what they want is people to be treated equal, people to be treated the same. Whether you're a 80-point scorer or you're a 5-point scorer, everybody has to be treated the same. I think what you were referring to, Andrew, is that, and we had a conversation about this, is there's two people in one in professional sports. It's the person and the player. When you're dealing with the person, you should never be talking about his abilities as far as his talents in the game. And when you're talking about the player and his performance, you should not be thinking about anything other than his performance. When you're coaching behind the bench, you put the best players out there to win in anything and everything you do. When you're talking to them about personal things, and we all go through them, we all have our highs and lows, you deal with that in separate. And I think if the players understand that there is a separation in that, everyone wants to be treated equal as a person, without question, and everything accepted. And as a player, they want to be given the opportunity to have success. It's up to you, depending upon your talents. And I think if that's what you present right up front and you follow through it, it's easy to get players to, come along. And what it is your veterans are really who you've had, really take it. Every year I would sit down with the veterans and say, anything you'd like to change, or what is it that is really difficult? And players want to have a certain identity, and I'm proud to have been associated with so many great players, who've had success, and are great people also.
Lou Lamoriello joining us here. We have a few more minutes with you, Lou. A couple more questions. First question is, how's everything going there with the Islanders with the COVID situation? Obviously, the Sabres were expected to arrive there and play you in a 2-game series. Is there any concern from Lou Lamoriello with what's going on in the league with the COVID situation? And what are the Islanders doing specifically? And what have you told your players about how to continue to protect themselves from ending up in protocol?
Well, I think that all of us are preaching the same as far as, we're in certainly an unknown area. This disease, this flu, or whatever we want to call it, there's so much unknown to it. So all we can do is take the advice of the medical people who have more knowledge and adhere to that, and just follow through on it, so that if you're supposed to be wearing your mask, then you make sure it happens no matter what. Whatever it is that we can do to avoid it, whether it's the spacing, whether it's the spacing of the rooms, all of that stuff, we just follow through 100% and don't allow people to cheat. But when you ask the question, what I tell players or what I've told my family members or tell my children or grandchildren is not to fear this virus, but to respect it. And what I mean by it is that to respect it to the point to do everything you possibly can to make yourself safe. But don't fear it. But, just make sure you're doing all the things right. It's no different in going into a game. You're playing against a top team. You should never fear the team you're playing, but you should respect it and make sure that you're at your best so that when you leave that game, you know you've done everything you possibly can. Nothing different here, that you're doing everything that you possibly can to prevent it, because your family members depend upon you. Anything that if you get sick because you're negligent, you're not respecting your family or your teammates. And I think that's it's a very simple analogy.
Lou Lamoriello joining us here. Riv, you wanted to say something there?
I do. I want to ask him. I know he's been a GM in the National Hockey League for a number of years now and a few different teams, but you started coaching Providence College back in 1970, and you coached there for 13 plus years in that D1 college. I understand that you've been a GM, but what was more fulfilling for you, to be a coach or to build a team, through being the general manager?
Well, I think that one of the toughest decisions I ever made was giving up coaching because you enjoy it so much. I have gone behind a bench in the NHL on a couple of occasions. But I think whatever you do at that given time is fulfilling, or you shouldn't be doing it. And I've looked at the position I'm in today. I enjoy coming to work every day because I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by great people and great talents of all different types. And I was fortunate in New Jersey for those years and decided that I was just going to, at that one point, I was just going to remain president. And then Brendan Shanahan came to me, who was my first draft, and said, why don't you come to Toronto with me? And did a pretty good sales thing. And I said, okay, I'll come for, 3 years. And then that was going to be it. And then the Islanders came, and I still felt good. And so I said, why not? So the fulfilling part comes out of the people you're working with, but success. This is a winning game, and it's the competition that drives you, and you shouldn't be in it unless you're in it to do the best you can to win and be a part of something. And to see, there's nothing better than to, when a team is won, to see the excitement on the players' faces and to see the sense of accomplishments and knowing that any price that they paid or any sacrifices they've made, they were rewarded. That's what drives you.
Lou Lamoriello joining us here. I know we don't have a ton more time, Lou. And my last question, I just want to make sure it gets asked. And I'm asking this on behalf of both Craig and I, but I just want to make sure, it's my job as the host here, Lou, to make sure that all these good questions get asked. And that is, can you describe your team makeup, please? Because when you build teams, especially the one you have now in the Islanders, when Craig and I look around this difficult East division, I know you might not be off to the start that you might have liked, but that can change quickly. It looks like you build your team with the mindset that the game is still physical and that you need role players that not necessarily fight, but play hard, finish checks, and intimidate. Do you believe that still is part of the game? I mean, I read that from your roster, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on our thoughts.
Without question, that's the case because that's playoff hockey. I don't think, and if you just watch this past year, and I commend what Tampa did and the job they did to change their roster a little. And we played against them, as you know, in the conference finals, and it was as much physical as talent on both sides. So yes, I do, and I think, Andrew, you can best know that because you were in New Jersey for a period of time, and that philosophy, as far as the team, had not changed. And in my opinion, there is a role for that player. And while I'm in the game, and if I'm associated with a team, there will always be a role on my team.
Well, I appreciate the honesty on that, because that's something that we debate here regularly with, we'll call it the instigators and friends. And there are people that sometimes disagree with us on what the game still requires, but I'm glad we see things like the same way. Last thing, I know, and I totally respect your time. I really do. And you've given us more than we could have ever imagined. I heard a story when I was playing for the Devils from one of your former players. It's a good story. All the players went to a Bruce Springsteen concert, and I think you went maybe to that concert too, but I don't know if you went. But I know maybe you like Bruce Springsteen, but you said to them, did you see how hard he worked on the stage? Did you see how hard he worked? And the guys were like, what do you mean? What do you mean? And you sent them back there that night in the Devil's Suite to watch how hard Bruce Springsteen worked on stage. Is that true or false?
Well, I think where that story came from was one of my players. And if I'd say this if he were here, is Scott Gomez. And what was told to Scott that, working hard, might be difficult, but it creates success. And somehow Bruce Springsteen came in because, without question, even though I'm not originally from New Jersey, but I spent time in Bruce Springsteen owns New Jersey, but his work ethic is just second to none as far as how hard he works. I don't remember that specifically, but like all stories, they get their ending becomes a beginning, and someone puts a new ending to it, and sooner or later it gets better and better. But I would not apologize for saying that Bruce Springsteen is one of the hardest workers that I've seen. But I've had some players who work pretty hard. But Scotty started that story. And, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some truth to it. As far as A to Z, I couldn't tell you that. But, what's wrong with having someone who works hard and having someone see that work get success?
Oh, no, it was amazing. And I really want to tell you the player that told me, because they loved it. They loved it. Like, we got to go back to the concert, and he was right. He's like, this guy didn't stop moving all night long. Have you ever hung out with Bruce Springsteen?
I've been in his company on a couple of occasions, but I've certainly, I'm not friendly with him, but I've been in his company, and his work ethic is incredible, and I have a lot of respect and admiration for him, and there's a reason why he's had the success that he's had, and is still going. It is still going.
Yeah.
Well, we can echo those same sentiments to you as well, Lou. And I'll say this, being a former player, I appreciated my time. More so, I appreciated our conversations after my career, because I think that's where you've probably had the most impact in my life, is some of the things you said to me that I carried over after my hockey career. So I appreciate that, and I really appreciate your time here today. It means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to Craig.
Well, when you spoke to me and asked if I do this, as I told you, that it'd be my pleasure to do it, and just continued success to both of you guys. And Craig, I'm sorry it didn't have the opportunity to work with you. It's probably our loss, because you've had a great career. I think you played, if I'm not mistaken, in your career, some 800-plus games in the NHL, and congratulations for that. And good luck, guys, and let's get through this pandemic so that we can all feel good about ourselves.
Well said. I bet you still have Craig's scouting report somewhere in your desk.
Yeah.
Take care, Lou. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, thank you so much. That was wonderful. Great catching up. Lou Lamoriello. We're not wrong with how we build teams, Riv. I'm going to continue doing our thing here. I mean, now that I'm pulling the dry erase board out because he just confirmed that, we're right here. Instigators, WGR Sports Radio 550. Elliot Friedman coming up next. That was fantastic. Check that one out in the audio demand. We'll be right back.